Hey everyone, I'm Matt, and as you can see from the title of the video, we are doing an SNES playing guide. Now, why not a buying guide, you might ask? Well, if you've been on the internet long enough, you've probably seen a lot of videos, and either videos, lists, articles that are like, here are the top 100 rare and expensive games, and these amazing games are amazing, but then you hear about them, you watch a video about them, maybe even do buy them, and you think, these aren't really good games, they're expensive, okay, but they're not really good games. And personally, I would rather get a cheap, great game than expensive trash. So this is not a video about being a collector. You can be a collector, that's cool, but a lot of us here really aren't looking at this from a collector's mentality. We're looking at this from the mentality of, do I like this? Will I like this? Is this going to be a good game? Will it be something that I want to play with friends? You could play some terrible games with friends, to be fair, but is this good? And so that's the perspective that we have here today. Now, some of these people that we have coming on, they're going to be talking about this, are people that have been playing this game, these games since they were kids. Maybe have been playing these games since they were yesterday. Literally, you're going to have a bunch of different voices from those guys play, talking about their experiences with the SNES, with these games, and hopefully giving you guys some good recommendations and some good tips. So let's jump to some of those right now.
Yeah, so I guess ones that I would recommend. Probably only recently, since I got them through the SNES Classic. But so far I've really loved Super Metroid, Donkey Kong Country, and technically I had it for the Game Boy Advance before this, but replaying it on this has been a lot of fun too. A lot of nostalgia behind it. Yoshi's Island. But yeah, I guess to go a little bit into each one, why I would recommend them. So Super Metroid, I just love the aesthetic. Just the idea of Samus being a bounty hunter in space, going after aliens. It's a really cool feel. The atmosphere really gets me into the game itself. Not just, like the gameplay is solid as well, but like it's really the atmosphere and the aesthetic that really does it for me. And just getting absorbed into it and just going down further and further into the planet, into these caves, finding all these alien life forms, and just ultimately destroying everything in your path because Samus is a complete badass. So yeah, definitely worth a pickup. The soundtrack too does an amazing job of just immersing you in it. I cannot tell you how many remixes I've been looking up on YouTube of old Super Metroid music. Donkey Kong Country is, I mean, it's a platforming classic, so I didn't really do too much platforming as a kid. It was definitely one of the genres I picked up more, but yeah, I mean, I never really played Donkey Kong as a kid, so going back and playing this one, a really strong entry in the series. I appreciate the level design and what it brought to platforming. So, like, yeah, there are plenty of moments where I get a bit frustrated, especially with, like, barrel segments or rail cars, and I'm sure anybody who played it as a kid knows that pain. I'm just going to readily admit now that, you know, I'm save scum, because they're save states. I couldn't do it without it. I'm going to admit it. I'm sorry. I want to go back and play, you know, the old cool games, but I don't have, like, 10 hours to dump into one level to get it perfect. But yeah, definitely a lot of fun as a platformer. I get why so many people growing up really appreciated this. Again, the soundtrack's really cool in that. And it looks really good for like, I know there are plenty of different titles for the SNES that do look good for that system, but like Donkey Kong Country kind of especially looks really cool to me. Almost like, if I didn't know any better, I would have said, oh, that's like N64, right? But no, it's the SNES. And for Yoshi's Island, again, that one originally I got for the Game Boy Advance. And I think it was the first game I actually beat as a kid. And I was really proud of that because I felt accomplished afterwards, because it got difficult at times. Like, it's one of those ones where it's just difficult enough to cause you headache and tear out your hair as a kid, but as an adult you can go back and be like, yeah, I know the levels well enough that I can get through it pretty quickly, but then you'll always stumble across those that are like, oh right, this one, oh god, this one. And hearing Baby Mario cry never gets any better. It's like nails on a chalkboard. But I love the art style for Yoshi's Island. It's got that really cartoony and sketchy drawn effect, and I love that so much. And just Yoshi's always been one of my favorite Mario characters, so it was cool to have a game with Yoshi front and center as like the main character. And yeah, I guess the music in that also definitely hits me, and then right in the nostalgia. But yeah, also a really cool platformer, with a little mix up with mechanics, because Yoshi's egg throwing does do a lot where you have to ricochet eggs around too at some levels, and it gets actually really tricky. Like going back and playing it older, it's like, oh yeah, like you could figure it out as a kid, but like it probably take you a hot second to get it just right, to finally throw the egg just right and get what you need to do. And going back through it now, wanting to get all of the flowers and all of the red coins and finishing it with the perfect star rating, it's rough because I want to do it, but half the time it's usually like, oh, you missed one coin or one flower or few star points, and it's like, no, I'm older now. I have to seek perfection. I cannot just let it go. But yeah, it's definitely a fun time, and I definitely recommend like all three of these.
So my personal picks for Super Nintendo, there were quite a few that I was big into when I was younger. One of them, I said, if you watched our Let's Play of it, you might remember Secret of Mana. That was a big one because that was an adventure RPG that was 3 players, so you and 2 other friends could get involved. And the idea of an RPG-style game that was multiplayer was fairly, like I said, not terribly common. So that was an excellent part of it. That was a good social type thing for when your friends would come over. You know, obviously great story, great music, awesome gameplay. You know, and if you tune into our run through of it, you'll see why. Final Fantasy IV, or as it was titled when I first played it on the Super Nintendo, Final Fantasy II. That was the one that got me into JRPGs. That was the first one that I played. I got it at the video store in a lark. The music instantly grabbed me. That was the first Uematsu composition that I ever heard and was instantly hooked. I love the characters. I love the music. Great world, very immersive story. And like I said, it completely was my gateway drug to JRPGs. And for many years after, that would be about 60% of all the video games that I would play, probably more, as you'll see from most of my other picks. Final Fantasy VI was another huge one. Again, released as Final Fantasy III when I initially played it on the Super Nintendo. For a lot of the same reasons, just more and bigger. You know, music, the characters, the story. You know, the 6 of all the Final Fantasies, I would have to say that if I absolutely had to choose one, 6 would be it. Like I said, the gameplay is very pick up and play. The characters are memorable. There are a lot of different playable characters to form a party from. There's 2 big, huge parts of the game. One is more linear. One's a little bit more freeform, a little more, open-ended. And like I said, just very, very memorable. Lots, and whatever version of it that you're playing these days, it will definitely leave an impact on you if you're a fan of JRPGs. Chrono Trigger. I would definitely be remiss if I left out Chrono Trigger. A possible contender for one of my favorite RPGs of all time. The perfect level of challenge. It wasn't a super long RPG as far as they go, but the fact that there were multiple endings and you were encouraged to play through multiple times with the New Game Plus to get them all was again something that at the time was unique. I'm going to sound like a bit of a broken MP3, but great story, great characters, great music. Like I said, just super fun gameplay. At no point did it ever become frustrating. It was one of the few games where I never got pissed off at any part. It was always appropriately challenging, and when it was difficult in a fun way, which I think I'm going to put that on my tombstone. Difficult, but in a fun way. And in a rare non-RPG example, Castlevania 4. Super Castlevania 4. To this day, and I've played a fair amount of Castlevania games. I'm not the hugest Castlevania fan. That was the first one that I played, and one of the only ones that really I've spent any time with. What stood out to me about it was just how tight and responsive the controls were. It was one of the earlier Super Nintendo titles, but the controls were really great, which in a Castlevania game, a lot of the difficulty comes from the fact that the controls are kind of, especially the older ones, like 1 and 3, I remember the controls being kind of stiff, which is difficult when you're doing things like trying to jump on steps without getting knocked off by a Medusa head and things like that. And also the whip, which not a lot of other games in the series, I don't think, had it this style. Again, feel free to correct me in the comments, but Castlevania 4 had it where you could completely control the movements of the whip. You could crack it, you could kind of, limply swing it around. And I remember having like one of those unauthorized strategy guides that was like, yeah, no off-color jokes about swinging a limp whip around. But yeah, very tight controls. You were in total control of the whip. You could use it as a shield to kind of block fireballs and things like that. And great music and great atmosphere and things like that. It had a lot of the usual suspects as far as like the Castlevania tracks. It was Bloody Tears, Vampire Killer, Simon's Theme, a lot of the usual music. But the arrangement of it was interesting. It wasn't all pipe organs and speed metal. It was kind of almost like a easy listening jazz sort of vibe to it, which was interesting considering it was supposed to be a kind of a dark Transylvania type affair there. I would probably have to mention Super Mario World because that was the first Mario game that I really sunk my teeth into. My sister and I still talk to this day about how, this is before the internet, we didn't have the strategy guide, so any secrets that we would find in Super Mario World had tons of them, like little out-of-the-way areas, levels you could only access if you did some weird specific trick in a particular level. It was also things you would find by accident, by yourself. There was one, we got it for Christmas, and all the rest of that year we were just finding, every time we turned the game on, we'd find something new. So that was, I would say my vote to this day for favorite Mario game. It was just a great experience. Lots of replay value, lots of secrets, and that goes a long way with me. I like when if I'm going to be playing these games for 20, 30 years, I like having a lot of different ways to experience it. And to this day, my nephews still love it and things like that. So it's pretty incredible. So like I said, there were just tons and tons of great games in the Super Nintendo. It has an amazing catalog, but those are my definitive picks. I would say at the very least give those a try. There's tons of others that are worth playing as well that may not have been part of my personal pantheon, but definitely still well worth checking out. I've never played Earthbound, but that's a great one. And Super Mario RPG, all the greats. So definitely check it out. I would say if there was one 16-bit console to check out, it would definitely be the Super Nintendo.
So it's my turn now. I don't know why I'm being so ominous about that. Either way, if we're talking about some games that I played as a kid, I would definitely suggest picking up Super Mario RPG. It got me into RPGs. Now, many people would say, but wouldn't it be Final Fantasy, or wouldn't it be some other franchise like Earthbound? Those were expensive. And I don't know about Final Fantasy, but Earthbound was expensive. So my family was trying to get games that were inexpensive. And I'll talk about some of the ways they did that a little bit later. But, so talking about Super Mario RPG, it got me into RPGs because at the time I knew who Mario was, and I was like, well, I've heard the word RPG, so let me try this out. I must have been either 5 to 9, somewhere in that range, and I enjoyed it so much, especially because you weren't just fighting with Mario, you ended up meeting new characters and even playing with some old ones. And I still haven't beaten the game to this day because I am awful at beating games, but I do admit, though, I still have the original cart. Definitely have to get back to that if the save battery still works, and it was just so much fun. That's the thing, it was taking a concept like Mario, something that at the time everyone knew about, everyone knew the formula. Me, I actually didn't. I didn't play the first 3 Mario games as a kid because I didn't have an NES as a kid. So I knew about Mario through the Super Mario World series, which we'll talk about also a little bit later. So seeing Mario, who again, I know this character, but in this format, trying to time it just right to get those attacks just right, seeing all of these brand new worlds and these characters, and also having the villain not be Bowser, which was interesting and very cool. Even as a kid, it was just like, hey, your expectations are being subverted, even though it was only the 3rd Mario game I ever played in my life. So I would definitely suggest getting Super Mario RPG and playing that if you can. We'll talk about ways to play that again a little bit later. Now, moving on to the Super Mario World series. Not that familiar with the first one, so I will recommend it, but not a hard recommendation. I have played it for a few hours here and there because, funnily enough, while I never owned the game, now I own the Japanese version, but I never owned the US version. Why, you would think? Well, because of the fact that I actually, before I had a Super Nintendo, I got into Super Nintendo going to the nail salon with my mom. So my mom would take me on errands, and because she would be like, you know what, let me take you out, probably to buy some other games as well or something. And so she would take me on errands, and they had a Super Nintendo at the back of this nail salon, and they had Super Mario World just playing 24/7. So, or just on, you know, while the lights were on. So I got my first taste of a Super Nintendo there. So I would definitely recommend it, but on a personal level, I would recommend Yoshi's Island even more. So in the US, it is marketed as the second Super Mario World game. It really isn't, but again, marketed that way in the US. So basically, Mario, if you don't know about the game, Mario's a baby. Yoshi isn't. Yoshi's protecting Mario from Kamek and a lot of other villains, and it's cute, but Mario's crying still gives me nightmares to this day. Even talking about this right now, somewhere inside, I hear it. It's in the back of my eyes, and it burns. Anyway, moving back to some fun stuff, it's actually drawn like crayons, and it's really cool when looking at the art style. The game does look like it might be extremely easy, but actually it does ramp up in difficulty as the game goes on. Also, you are scored from 0 to 100%. That did not make me feel good in grade school, but now I don't care. Either way, you do have to collect different kinds of coins and sunflowers and things like that to boost up your score. So you can beat the game, but there is this thought, again, in the back of your head that's like, but I want 100% it. I want to. So again, would definitely recommend it. Now let's move on to a little game called Mega Man X. So, you've probably heard of Mega Man. You've probably heard of Mega Man X. This does not take place in the same continuity as Mega Man, so they're both separate franchises. You can play either one if you'd like. When it comes to Mega Man X, though, I haven't played 2 and 3, funnily enough. I did play the later installations on the PS1, but playing the first one, I really, really enjoy this game. I mean, you've seen me do reviews of it before, and yeah, there's good reason. It's a damn good game. So the story involves you trying to fight a series of mavericks, basically evil robots. You're a good robot, but you have the potential of becoming evil. No, they never really addressed that, but I guess you arguably could. Either way, you're a good robot. You're going around, you're created by Dr. Light, and you need to go fight these bad guys. You don't have to fight the bosses in any particular order. If you do, though, you will get different power-ups. Either way, though, the end stretch, that's the only thing I won't recommend. The end stretch of this game is horrifying. It hurts. I could not beat it without save states. I don't care. You judge me. I don't care. But beating the other bosses, the main bosses, I could easily do because I've played that part of the game so much when I was a kid and even now. So I've played it so many times, I know what I can do there, but when it comes to the final stretch, I never beat the game until I actually beat it on an episode of Matt Beats Games from his childhood. So yeah, that last part, that's just like Mario's crying. It's there. It's just there. Also, if you're a fan of Power Rangers, I would definitely suggest getting the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Fighting Edition. Now, I'm not knocking the other Power Rangers games that exist on the system. They're good, but I really like this one because you can actually fight as the Zords, and you can fight against other monsters. It is so much fun. I understand if you don't have a connection to the series, you might be like, yeah, I don't really care, but if you grew up with Power Rangers or if you went back and watched it, I would definitely say that you should definitely pick up this game. Only covers the first few Zords and the first few series, of course, because that's when it was released. But either way, would definitely suggest getting this game. It is so unique and different. At least it was for me personally at the time. I enjoyed fighting games at the time, but it definitely started my love of fighting games before I actually got to the PS1. So I would definitely suggest picking it up if you are a fan of Power Rangers, or even Super Sentai, I would say. It's definitely a good time. And again, you can also play some of the other Power Rangers games that exist as well. Don't have as much experience with them, but they were fun too. There was a normal Power Rangers game, and there was one called The Movie, which was based off of the Power Rangers movie. So you could play those. Again, they were fun. You're seeing them right now, but I would definitely suggest, just for my personal collection, getting into the Fighting Edition. So we talked about the games, but here is the best part: how you can play them. So there are a few different ways. You can see there's some consoles behind me, but let's actually get a good shot of them right now. So you have, of course, the original SNES. By the way, some of the stuff is coming out of my collection. There are other ways to play these games, of course, but we're just going to focus on some that I have personally on hand. So the original Super Nintendo, you can play it that way, but when you turn it around, you realize that it is AV only. Well, there is an RF there, but again, it depends on your television setup. So if you only have HDMI, there are converters, some of them better than others. I definitely don't have any great ones on hand, but there are ways to just get it up and running and working on your television. Now, if you want to have none of the hassle and you want to support Nintendo, the SNES Classic Edition does exist. So it does come preloaded with, I'm going to say 19 or 20 games, a lot of them considered classics. It can be modified to add more games if you like, but if you don't want that hassle, again, it's HDMI out. You can just plug that into your television, 4K, whatever it is. If it doesn't have AV cables, this might be your best bet for $80 to $90. It's $80 retail, but I don't believe it's retail anymore. So I would suggest if you do try to buy one, maybe go a little over $100 potentially. I mean, there's some great games on here, but you really shouldn't be paying $300 for this thing. The Super Nintendo Classic does come with 2 controllers, so there are some 2-player games on there that you actually can play with a friend, so that's pretty cool as well. But I don't believe it works with the multi-tap, which might sound funny to some people. Multi-tap allows you to play with more than 2 players. Even though Secret of Mana can be played with 3 players, I don't believe any company has made an official multi-tap thing that allows you to kind of connect a third SNES Classic controller into the system. So that is something to note if you want to get the full Secret of Mana experience, if you will. Now, if you do have cartridges, if you're someone who's a purist, but for some reason you don't want to have a Super Nintendo in your collection, or you can't get an original Super Nintendo in your collection, there are other ways to play it as well. So there is the Retron 3 and the Retron 5. Also this Retro Duo Portable, which is, yes, an SNES, a portable SNES, which you can actually plug cartridges into. Now, when it comes to the Retron 3 and 5, though, these are actually for multiple systems at once. So the Retron 3 has the NES, SNES, and the Sega Genesis, and the Retron 5 allows you to plug in the Famicom, NES, SNES, Sega Genesis, and also Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Color. Good time to also mention that this is not sponsored by any of these companies, just telling you different ways to play this if you're not interested in getting the original Super Nintendo, because you are buying these online. Some of these might be a little grimy or iffy. You might be worried about the condition. So these Retrons and other consoles as well come brand new. So either way though, the Retro Duo Portable has some compatibility issues. All of these are going to, unless you go for the original Super Nintendo. So I would suggest personally going for the Retron 5 because you just get more bang for your buck. You could go for the Retron 3 as well, but again, remember that Retron 5 is HDMI out, Retron 3 is not. And also the Duo Portable isn't HDMI out as well. So again, it really depends on your setup. Also, something to note with the controller ports on the Retron 3 is that you cannot mix and match. The Retron 5, you actually can. You can plug in any controller and play any game. So if for some reason you want to play a Super Nintendo game with a Sega Genesis controller, you can do that, but you can't do that with the Retron 3. So again, that's something to make note of. Alright, so before we wrap this up, one personal story. I mentioned earlier that my family likes to save money. Well, I took a look at some games in my collection, and I realized something. A lot of them, I still had the manuals. I didn't have the boxes, but I had the games and the manuals. A lot of the manuals are in black and white. And I was like, why are they in black and white? Did we get them from a game store, like a Blockbuster, and we never returned them? No, it turns out they bought the Majesco re-releases, which were actually $30 compared to $60 or more games at the time. So what that means is that for certain games in my collection, like Mega Man X, The Lion King, and some others that are escaping me, I believe the Star Wars game as well, Super Empire Strikes Back, which I can't really recommend it as much because I don't have as much experience with it. I played it a bit as a kid and then I just stopped playing it for some reason. But still though, I look at them now and I'm like, you saved money, which is good, but it's just kind of funny that as a kid I was like, oh my god, or when I was a teenager I was like, did we just not bring these back? What's going on? No, my family just wanted to save 30 bucks. But you know what? Hey, that's fine. I mean, I'm not judging them. It's just kind of funny that it managed to turn out that way. Also wanted to mention that this is not meant to be a definitive guide to the best SNES games. Wanted to say that because at this point I feel like some of you have probably commented down below saying, but that game isn't as good as this game, and you might be right. And I would like to say as well, by the way, definitely down below comment about some of your SNES recommendations for some people that are just jumping into this. So definitely do that, but this is in no way meant to be. This video is meant to be a definitive edition. It's just stuff that, like I mentioned earlier, that we played when we were little ones. Or again, for some people, like this past month or so. Either way though, guys, thank you all so much. Love you all. Take care, and tune in next time when we do a video just like this. And if you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe and hit that bell icon notification to be notified when we put out more videos. Alright guys, love you all. Take care. See ya.